So, speaking of a new coach, they lose former head coach Maurice Lindquist to Alabama. They in turn hire Pete Lambeau, who was previously the South Carolina special teams coordinator, to lead this team here in 2024. What can you tell us about Coach Lambeau and what he brings to the table for the Bulls?
He has brought in, as the kids would say, a whole different vibe. I'll say this. Pete was introduced in January. You walked into the field house for his introduction. You talked to people around the facility. You talked to people in administration. You could just feel it was like, I think the word I used was relief. It was like, we can try something new. We can try something different. Pete is very personable. He's a Georgetown graduate. So he's a smart guy, Staten Island native, raised by, New York City police officer. His dad worked 20, 25 years in the force. And, you go to Georgetown, you think, oh, he's going to be, in business or finance or pursuing higher education. You want to be a football coach as well, too. So he climbed the ladder. He took over a program at Lehigh, really got them, them to continue a winning trajectory. Became a head coach at Elon, turned around that program, went to Ball State, from 2011 to 2015, made Ball State into a contender, and then went to the P5 level and went to Maryland as a special teams coordinator. Special teams are his things. If you watch some of the stuff that, South Carolina did the last couple of years, they were a juggernaut in the SEC when it came to special teams play. So, he was just a, really good support staff, really creative guy, very, very cerebral, very into pop culture, wants to relate to his players as well, makes people feel important. And that's a big thing, especially at this level, not just in dealing with the players, dealing with the coaches, you're dealing with the front-facing public. Because if the ecosystem of sports in Buffalo, Bills and Sabres rule the roost. So you got to be front-facing. You got to get out and shake hands and kiss babies to promote the University of Buffalo football program. Or you got to win, or both. So I think that's one thing Pete's going to be very good at as well. Literally his first or second week on the job, he was going out and meeting high school coaches in the area. He was sending his assistants out to meet high school coaches in the area as well. I had a high school coach say to me here, we haven't had a UB coach do that in a while. Show up unannounced and just sit in the office and talk football. So that is one thing that he's really doing. He's really trying to I wouldn't say create a new image, but just kind of, again, like the kids say, create a new vibe around the University of Buffalo. And he really, really believes in accountability, showing up on time, fulfilling your responsibilities. If you're not going to be here, you need to say why. Basic things that kind of have gotten lost generationally. So that's really important as well. That is what this program needs. It really needs a shot of accountability, which I think is going to lead to bigger things. That's what they had under Lance Leipold a few years ago. And I think Pete's going to be a really, really important guy, he and his staff, in reinstituting that into the culture and getting people to fall in line and doing it in a professional way.
As it often happens when you get a new head coach, this also means new assistant coordinators. Buffalo is no different in that regard. Coach Parker brings in Dave Patnode, who's previously the analyst at Virginia, to serve as the offensive coordinator. What type of offense or changes can we expect to see?
Well, before we talk scheme, they got to pick a quarterback. They have no proven quarterback on the roster. I know CJ Ogbonna split time with Cole Snyder last year, Cole Snyder who transferred out, but he couldn't prove that he could throw the ball. Jack Shields is from Old Dominion transfer, was told he can wing it, but we haven't seen him in live reps in a while. All I've watched of him is footage. And yeah, he can wing it, but it was also very heavily edited footage. That's the big question. Before, and even Pete told me this, he said, before we can decide on schemes, before we can do this, we got to evaluate our personnel. And yeah, they've had 3 or 4 months to evaluate it, 5 at this point. So they got to get a quarterback. They've got to evaluate their receivers. They have, I think it's like their top returning receiver, Nick McMillan, he's going to be his 3rd year with the program, missed 5 games last year with a shoulder injury as well. He had 180 yards on 13 catches and a touchdown last year. They're going to just need to see how he does over the long haul. They're also going to have to see how some of their transfers fit in as well. They've got a kid from Columbia. The name escapes me right now, but he was Columbia's leading receivers. He's a transfer. Taji Johnson from Boston College. they want to see, they have to see these guys over the long haul. Taji's older brother, Najee, played for UB about 10 years ago. I think he's now a scout with the Houston Texans as well. As far as the running backs go as well, they've lost their top 2 running backs from last year, Ron Cook Jr. and Mike Washington, who put together about 1,000 yards as well. Jacques Barksdale showed, again, in short term, he can carry the ball well, pounding running back also, but you have to see how these guys stretch themselves out over an entire season. One thing that really helps UB, I think, they're definitely going to have depth at running back this year behind Barksdale. They've got Lamar Sperling, another guy who he was the Ohio Senior of the Year in 2022, came in part of a big recruiting class, got hurt again, didn't really get a chance to play. Mark Anthony Scott as well, Joe Jiggy also. They've got depth at that position. I think they're going to be okay there. And they've got some holes to fill on the offensive line, but they've got a lot of their veterans coming back. Tyler Doty, Don Polizzi, Isaiah Wright was a big loss going to Maryland. You look at that was kind of the evolution with the landscape as well, too. And they've got some holes they can fill in with transfers as well, too. So really, they've really got to evaluate and see what they're doing. And I kind of joke, I'm like, oh, Pete, you just don't want to tell anybody what your scheme's going to be. But, I buy that. You got to look at your personnel. You got to see how they're going to shake out in spring practices as well, too.
So, you talked a little bit about the quarterbacks. They lose last year's starter, Cole Snyder, off to Eastern Michigan. You mentioned CJ Agbana, and he did much more damage with his legs than his arms in 2023. They also returned Gunnar Gray, who redshirted in 2023. And then after spring practice that you mentioned, they brought in Jack Shields from Old Dominion. In the spring, did CJ look like he had improved his passing? Is he like the leader going into fall camp, or it's just
the sample size was too small to tell, to be honest. And in the spring game, it was it was between Gunnar Gray, the guy who just transferred, Richie Watts, CJ Agbana, Mike DePillo, and nobody really stood out. It was a very small sample size. It was one game as well. They're constantly rotating quarterbacks during spring practice. So I think we left, those of us who watched that spring game, we left with more questions about the quarterback position than answers. I think I saw that when I saw the Jack Shields a transfer, and I said, okay, there's some help. And I thought also there are some other quarterbacks out there who may also been able to help as well too. But it's gonna be, it's really, really gonna be about who can go and win this. Gunnar Gray, I was told by a couple people, in the program said, he may be a dark horse in this race as well too. He did really, really well at the junior college level, decided to stay on, but another part of me was like, well, how is this going to translate in as well too? So I think that's one of my question areas that I'm even going to write that we're going to face. I'm like, we still have more questions and answers than we do about the quarterback situation right now. And, unless there's some kind of secret deal that's cut that someone said, oh, Jack Shields, you're going to be the starting quarterback, go through the charade. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can't tell you much about these guys.
And it sounds like Shields certainly at least is going to be at least given an opportunity to win the job in fall camp.
Oh, yeah. So. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a quarterback competition. Definitely will. But at the same time, it's kind of like unlike years past, there's, when 3 years ago, Kyle Van Treese and Matt Myers. Kyle Van Treese was, he was the guy. Cole Snyder, Matt Myers. Cole Snyder, who had come in from Rutgers, and Matt Myers, who just never really shaped up to be this. There was a favorite in these. There isn't one this year. That's what makes this so challenging.
So moving over to the running game, you talked about Mike Washington and Ron Cook Jr. and then Barksdale. Barksdale's the senior, but overall the room is a pretty young room. Last year we saw Cook and Washington dominate the running back touches. Do you think we're going to see a 2-back system again?
If you have 2 running backs, you have none. And at some points, it seemed like UB had 4 running backs last year. And I think the constant rotations, I don't think it did well for consistency. And that's what this team also needs to establish, is consistency as well. I mean, if I'm the coach of this team, I just say, everybody's competing for number one, number two, number three. And that's also, again, why you have games like you do August 29th against Lafayette. You know, the kind of what's the Seinfeld joke? It's the game about nothing, but that's the game where you see, okay, how's this kind of going to work? How's this going to work? How does this guy fit in and whatnot? You kind of get in the lab there, and then you face Missouri the following week. But, it's young. It's unproven. Again, Barksdale has got to prove how he can do this over the course of 12, maybe 13, maybe 14 games as well, too. That is really what these guys are going to do. They not only have to prepare to win these jobs, they've got to prepare for the long haul of the season.
So would you anticipate beginning of the year, a lot of back seeing what we got, and then kind of probably by halfway through, maybe have an idea of what this room really looks like?
I think probably by the Northern Illinois game in mid-September, we're gonna have a better idea. You got Lafayette, you've got Missouri, which is no slouch. Then you've got Connecticut. Might be a winnable game, but I think Connecticut's really going to be the litmus test for this team. Because then they go right into Northern Illinois as well. So I don't think it's going to be wait till the halfway point of the season, because especially in the MAC, you can't afford to wait that long.
So moving over to the wide receivers, they got hit in a big way with graduation. Darryl Harding Jr., Booby Curry, and Cole Harity, who were second, third, and fourth in team receiving yards, all graduated. Leading receiver Marilyn Johnson goes off to Florida Atlantic. And so the top returners are Nick McMillan and Chance Morrow. Both were freshmen last year and combined for 17 receptions in 2024. You mentioned this a little bit. You talked about, I guess, how they addressed the losses. You mentioned Tajee Johnson, and there was, I think, another receiver you mentioned they brought in.
From Columbia as well.
Yeah.
Columbia receiver.
Let
me correct myself one more time. I said they were going to play UConn. They're playing UMass. It's UMass, Northern Illinois, and then UConn. My mistake. So,
how did the wide receivers look in the spring? I think Nick McMillan, if I remember correctly, had a pretty big spring game.
Nick McMillan looked very, very strong, and after the spring game, Pete Lembo said, "We are counting on him to be the guy." Interesting about Nick McMillan, he went to high school here in Buffalo, except for his senior year. He went down to Maryland to Wise to play football. That was during the pandemic. They had different regulations, and came back, and he was even going to be a starter last year as well too. I know Maurice Linguist was really, really impressed by the work he did and put in the effort to put in as well too. So and there's a lot of that as well. But again, you got to figure out how are these guys like Tajee Johnson and the younger players coming in, how are they also going to fit again? I think Tajee is going to be a very, very good addition as far as, from a leadership standpoint goes as well. He was at Boston College as well. I think that's just a really, really strong addition as well. And, the player from Columbia whose name keeps escaping me, JJ Jenkins. I wanted to call him JJ Johnson. JJ Jenkins. It finally came to me. He was Columbia's leading receiver last year. There's someone, he has the experience. He has proven that he can do this over the course of an entire season, as opposed to just 2 or 3 games. And that goes for the consistency as well. And so when you figure a guy from Columbia, it's got to be smart, got to be organized, got to have things together as well, too.
So do you think those 3, Jenkins, Johnson, and McMillan, are probably the 3 starters? Or
I don't know. Honestly, I am not. I don't want to project that far as well, because last year I thought Nick McMillan was going to be a starter, and he came off the bench.
You were the only one.
I was wrong. I was like, I'm not afraid to say when I'm wrong, but I can see all 3 of those guys in competition for that as well, and they definitely have the edge as far as that goes. So who knows? One of the things that Pete Lembo was telling me that he likes about the spring and getting guys ready, he's like, he was telling me this back in February. He said, one of the things I like about when you get to the spring, says you see these guys, they may have a slow start. You might not think that they're going to be into this, but all of a sudden the light bulb comes on. They're going to, and he says, and all of a sudden they're in the mix, and you're like, that's a nice surprise. There might be someone that comes out of that, comes out of there and does that also. And that's not just at wide receiver. That's just about any position on the field as well. That could be an incoming freshman. That could be a guy, a guy who didn't really play that much last year as well, too. It could be a guy coming in like a freshman like Pat Clax, big 6'2" dude from here. You don't know. And that's the thing. It's kind of like there are all these little surprises that come in as well, too. And that's kind of one of the things Peter Lembo is excited about is he's kind of mining through this program and figuring out who goes here, who goes where.
In the spring, did it seem like they were doing a good job of spreading the ball around, or were they just targeting like one or two guys? Or
yeah, they were more targeting one or two players, and a lot of throws were either short or one on target. And you're thinking, who took the time? The question I asked about was, did someone or anyone take the time away to develop chemistry and timing and synchronicity with these receivers? That's a tough thing to do. And, again, more questions than answers about the quarterback position. And as we know, the wide receivers, a lot of their success hinges on how well the quarterback's proficiency.
Absolutely. Yeah.
From what you've seen and heard in this new offense, how do you envision the tight end being used?
Oh, that's a good question because tight ends were almost overused last year. And I think there's got to be more balance in the run, between not just the receivers, but between the run and the pass game as well, too. I really think that's one thing that they have got to do. I love a guy like Andrew Snackenberg, the big snack, as I call him, because you could put him in on those, short yardage situations where you need a long body on a fade pass or something. I remember I think it was a Kent State. He had a beautiful, beautiful catch that just really evolved out of that. There was such a nice use of the tight end as well, too. And, he's almost underutilized at times as well, too. Another guy who they could have turned to was Jake Orlando, another guy from Buffalo, from Williamsville North, but he got hurt. So, he was supposed to be a graduate transfer. He gets an extra year of eligibility. They'll find a way to incorporate him. He's another guy, big, tall, rangy dude as well. Zion Carter was a little more last year. He was a fifth-year senior, the son of Kevin Carter, the former NFL player. A little more of a blocking guy, but at times very good situational guy. But since we have to see what kind of offense that Dave Patnode and Pete Lembo are going to use, we got to see where are the tight ends going to fit in.
Moving over to the offensive line, you lose your left tackle to graduation. Center Isaiah Wright transfers to Maryland. But other than that, they seem to fare pretty well in terms of returning production, returning left guard Trevor Brock, right guard Tyler Doty, and right tackle Kalen Shepard. How did the offensive line look in the spring?
They look good. They look solid. Don Polizzi, their center, coming back from an ankle injury last year, so he was hobbled through part of the year, and that didn't help the situation and the synergy on the line as well. But Tyler Doty, this is going to be his. I have lost count of him. I remember covering him when he was in high school, my first year here at St. Joe's. 2021, 22. This is going to be his fourth or fifth year. I've lost track. That's how long I've been covering this program. I'm now losing track of players and their eligibility years, but he's really going to be the anchor of this line as well, too. That's and that's one thing, a lot of people are going to be leaning on him to do that as well. Both the offensive line and the defensive line, I have no questions about it.
Who do you see starting at left tackle on that offensive line? I know they brought in Gabriel Area from Virginia Tech. Do you think he fits into that, or?
That's the X factor there as well, too. That's one where I'm going to I look at it and say, wow, what are they could convert somebody as well, too. That's another thing that is not off the table. Someone could change positions as well. Isaiah Wright was one of those versatile guys who could move around as well. He was at center at one point in the season as well. So you gotta see, are they going to convert someone into a tackle? Are they going to move someone from the defensive line to the offensive line? That's another question that needs to be answered.
So it seems like there's a lot of room for opportunity to have a breakout season in this offense, in this young offense. If you had to pick somebody to have that breakout type season in 2024, who are you picking?
Nick McMillan. Definitely Nick McMillan. Oh, and whoever is the quarterback, whoever that could be.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.
Bye.